Welcome everybody to 1860 Club. It's indeed an honour and a privilege to have as our first guest on these video presentations, Richard Norris, who's affectionately known as Dick to everybody around the club. Dick is a living legend of the club. Let me just give you a little bit of an introduction. The family is synonymous with Preston and its history. Dick joined the club in 1948-49, but his parents were already members of the club, and his father became president of the club and served in that capacity for a long time. Dick had his brother join the club much later, David, his two sons, Peter and Andrew, and his wife, Arena. And their contribution to the club is just absolutely outstanding from a playing and administrative point of view. So we're sort of here in one sense to celebrate that, but more importantly to celebrate what Dick's contribution has been. He joined Preston in 1948-49, originally to operate the scoreboard. He didn't start playing until 1950-51, but what a start it was, because he continued for 41 seasons, which is amazing. He played over 500 games across all 11s, played in 6 premiership teams, won the batting average in various teams on 7 occasions, made over 9,000 runs, 300 wickets, bowling medium paces. A really good player over a long period of time, and a lot of young players learnt a hell of a lot playing under Dick. His contribution to the club on the playing side was important, but as an administrator, it's been significant. He's been club secretary, president, he's been president of the JICA, an outstanding administrator, working for the Victorian Sub-District Cricket Association as a delegate, on the executive committee as treasurer, as an alternate delegate to Cricket Victoria. And for his outstanding contribution in 2019, he was awarded the Order of Australia Medal for services to cricket and the community. What a record. It is absolutely amazing. Welcome, Dick.
Thank you, Lee.
It's good to see you.
I feel very humble.
It's one hell of a story, and we'll talk about the story at various times during the course of this discussion, but Dick's grandfather was a foundation member of the Yarraville Cricket Club in 1907. So the association with Sub-District is absolutely huge. It's over 100 years, and not too many people can put their hands up and get anywhere near that. Dick, when you first joined the club, we didn't play under the red and white colours, we played under the blue and gold. What was the story there?
The story there was that Preston and the football club had traditionally played in blue and gold right from very early days. When the football club joined the VFA, they were required to change their colours because Williamstown were already in the VFA, and that was the Williamstown colours, and with the yellow sash. The cricket club continued with blue and gold for many years. I think the VFA Preston started in the early 1900s, but the cricket club continued. But there was a push, particularly amongst the younger ones, to go for the colour of red and white. To me, partly I think driven through the football club, but also because I think they thought it was a bit more of a colour that stood out. And there was a vote. It was a very close vote at an annual meeting in 1960-61. I think in the end, the red and white won by 1 vote. And not without some acrimony. The committee in those days was a very lively affair. There was up to 24 members on the committee, and the committee was split over it. But ultimately, the red and white prevailed, and that's been our club colour ever since.
Great story. Great story. What was it like when you first walked onto the ground at Preston?
Well, the only other time I'd been there was the year before when the school sports for the district were held in 1947-48. And I'd represented the school then. But to walk onto the ground, it was just huge. it's just something you never forget, to have been on an oval that is in such good nick. Mind you, in those days it was a smaller ground. It was renovated in 1955-56, and the boundary extended by about 6 metres to make the ground wider. And they lengthened the ground in the early 1970s by another 4 metres and to make it bigger. But it is still one of the smallest grounds in the VFA. I think Camberwell, at the time when they were playing in VFA, were the only smaller ground.
You took a while to work your way into the first, 1959-60, so you were player number 273, following your father, who was 211. And you both made your debuts against Yarraville. How did you go?
I don't think I bothered the scorers too much. Yarraville in those days were a very strong side. In fact, my memory is it was played at Preston. We had some very good players then, Cole Miller, Bill Lewin, Ken Dunbar, and we actually beat Yarraville that day. I think it was a one-dayer, but I'd have to go back and have a look at the scorebook. But I might have made a dozen, but that was about all.
Memorable.
Well, yeah, you never forget it. Yeah,
that's right. 3 years later, or 4 years later, the club won their first premiership under Ray Harvey from the famous Harvey cricketing family. Ray made quite an impact at Preston, and in his third year, he won the premiership. What were your recollections of Ray?
I would class Ray as, he was generally considered to be one of the unluckiest players not to play Test cricket for Australia. He didn't quite have that little bit of attitude, if you like, that Neil had. He was a gentleman, one of the finest fieldsmen you'd ever wish to play next to, and just a real gentleman. No one had a bad word to say about him. But he was such a natural player himself. He didn't find coaching very easy in passing on information and trying to teach players. But if that's a criticism, well, I'm sure it's not meant to be too strong. He brought a lot of kudos to Preston.
1965-66, the Seconds won a premiership and you were the skipper. A big win too from the scorebooks. You won by over 100 runs. So you won the toss and batted.
66-67 it was, Lee, actually. Sorry. But yeah, look, very interesting year. I was given the captaincy. It was going to be a difficult year because we had a very young side and didn't expect to trouble anyone too much. But we started to win games and we just built on confidence. And we had some potentially very good players of the future. Ian Baggett, Barry Padley, who was lost to cricket to play football with Fitzroy, Dennis Davey, who wicketkeeper. Yeah, we had some genuinely prospective good players that were coming through. Interestingly enough, we beat sides in the finals we were not expected to beat. We beat Port Melbourne, who were always strong. Then we beat Geelong, who had a player in Davis who was genuinely quick and had taken over 60 wickets, but we still beat them. And then we played Waverley in the grand final. We got them on the back foot very early. I think I actually got a run out in the first over, threw the stumps down at the bowler's end and got their best batsman out, literally, and put them under the pump right from the start. And that was the match that Ian Baggett really took over after we had passed them, and he ended up making 86.
Fantastic. Over the period that you were an administrator, or still are, you've been associated with 7 premierships in the firsts, 7 in the seconds. So that's some record. They're hard to win premierships. Which is the premiership that you sort of remember most? You would have seen them all.
Yes. Look, I think the sheer class, the standout was the day we played Altona and they made, on day one, they made 260 odd. And we started the next day, we were 3 for 60 odd. And then Gamini Pereira and Runga de Silva had an unfinished partnership of nearly 200, scoring at an average of between 6 and 7 and over. And Gamini hit 2 sixes to go from 89 to 101 in successive balls. And it was just a phenomenal win. And we achieved the 260 odd runs in 50 overs. Wow. It was just brilliant, at Caulfield. That was the standout, but the others were all great wins because there were some very strong sides in those days.
Now, over the history of your involvement in the club, you would have seen so many players, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of players. Is there a standout batter? You've probably gone close to giving us a hint in relation to that victory just then, but who was the best batter that you saw